I'd like to open the regular planning board meeting for March 7th, which includes a public hearing. We are being live broadcast and videotaped as well. So first is the administrative items. And just as a thing, I'm going to get into the public hearing stuff, but please keep your voices down and your conversations to yourself, because we're trying to have a meeting here. So administrative items, letter to the Board of Selectmen requesting that the Highway Department solicit bids for Maya Way project.
Okay, so I've actually drafted a memo for you guys to read. It's for the authorization of appropriation of funds for the expenditure of surety for the completion of the definitive plan for Medeiros Farm for Maya Way. So this is the next step in the process to getting the road done to the best of its ability from the town. So if this memo looks good to you, then I will send it along to the select board for them to vote on for their next hearing, meeting.
So do you need a vote as recommended in the last paragraph of this memo?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, based on the recommendation of the staff, I would move that we request the selectmen, the Board of Selectmen, and I do hope they change that name. I move that we request the Board of Selectmen to request a vote to authorize the expenditure of the surety under the accepted provisions of Chapter 245 of the Acts of 1988, which is held by the town of Westport treasurer. The balance of this account is estimated to be $87,000.
Second.
And just this discussion, are we expecting the Highway Department to do this work?
We would expect the highway department to do this
Okay,
work,
so we're
yes.
asking the Highway Department to do the work that is required for the $87,000.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Next administrative item is 202 Pine Hill Road, file number 19-012 SP, endorsed Form G for performance surety.
So this item does not need a vote. It was already voted on in December 13th of 2022. Pine Hill, Greenbacker Renewable Energy has agreed to provide the board with a $100,000 check for performance surety. So they have returned their signed copy, so I just need the planning board to endorse the Form G.
Okay. Okay, Assistant planners report?
I don't really have an assistant planner's report this week. I have a lengthy review for the upcoming
Okay.
public hearing.
Planners report?
Give me 1 second. All right, first I've got an update to open meeting law. The House has approved the governor's supplemental 2023 budget bill, and when they did so, they amended it to include an extension allowing remote and hybrid meetings through March 31st, 2025. So whether or not that gets signed, updates will be forthcoming, but keep an eye out for that because, again, remote meetings will expire at the end of the month. So if you have any boards that you're on that meet next month in April, plan accordingly. Next, I have an update on the Route 6 rezoning initiative. We met with our consultant BSC group last week, and we had a high-level discussion of the types of development that would be appropriate in the Route 6 corridor. So this was looking at things like potentially multi-unit residential on Route 6, smaller lot development on the periphery of that corridor with smaller homes, duplexes, things of that nature. So it's just a more general conversation to orient where the consultant will continue with developing the project. Next, I have we were working on an application to the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant. That has now been transitioned into an application to the MVP 2.0 program. It's a new program that they're going to be releasing this year. And we switched gears a bit because we had a meeting with our regional rep, Courtney Roca, of the MVP program. They've changed some eligibility requirements to the MVP program for planning action grants, and so we are not going to meet some of those eligibility requirements this year. So in that meeting, she described the MVP 2.0 application process, and it sounds like it's a grant program that'll help us begin drafting a climate resilience plan. So we're gonna go that route. And so the initial phase of the MVP 2.0 would update our current municipal vulnerability plan. It would expand detail of our identified vulnerabilities and also help us reprioritize and include more public engagement with that process as well. And then at the end of that process, we would be eligible for a seed grant that could be used for planning services or as we go through that process with a consultant, it could go towards a different project. So it's potentially open-ended. And we'll hear more about that in our meeting, our Climate Resilience Committee meeting on Thursday at 5 o'clock. I will... Okay, next I have the Southeastern New England Program Watershed Implementation Grants. This is a grant opportunity I circulated last week, and Bob Daler alerted me to it. We could potentially apply for this grant to help try to get some funds to assist with implementation of the town's target integrated watershed management plan. So one idea I had is that the plan's recommendations include having a pilot program to install vegetative buffer strips to help filter nitrogen and other pollutants, and stormwater runoff near agriculture and more large-scale commercial developments. And so we could use grant funds for installation and monitoring of those kinds of installations. So that's one potential option. I've shared the program with you all. So if you have any other ideas or any input on the pilot program, let me know, and we can talk a little bit more about that further. And lastly, actually, no, I have two more. I have one that I didn't initially include on your report. So I think this was on Friday last week. SERPED, the Southeastern Planning and Economic Development District, they drafted an online survey to help us do some public research for updating the town's housing production plan. So this survey is going to have a variety of questions ranging from whether there's enough housing to meet the needs of Westporters, as well as what kinds of housing residents would like to see. Amy and I approved their draft, and it should be getting circulated soon. So we will be sharing that with you all, posting it on the town's website, and please feel free, everyone here, to share that on social media or share it with folks through other venues, just because we really do need that feedback to develop that plan. And then lastly, I have an update on the Main Road streetscape plan. This is a plan that's kind of in the works at a very conceptual level to consider streetscape improvements on Main Road in the Central Village. And so Mark Schmid, here on the planning board, he expressed interest in potentially participating on this work group. And I am also going to meet with the Bike and Walking Path Commission next week to provide them an overview of this potential project and ask for a representative from that committee. And that is all that I have for the planner's report.
So I think in one of your emails, you said you were reaching out to the people who were previouspreviously on the sidewalk committee. Have you had any responses to that?
Is that the Bike and Walking Path Committee? No. I have not reached out to them.
Okay.
And I will have to, I will do that.
Okay. Thank you. Minutes, I'm sorry, correspondence?
We don't have any.
None. Okay, minutes of February 21st?
Mr. Chair, I've read the minutes, and as far as I can recollect the actual meeting, I think the minutes accurately reflect what took place. And so I would move we adopt the minutes of February 21st, 2023.
I second that.
Any comments? Changes?
Well, there's a minor, maybe minor typo here under page 3. The motion to approve the WB Mason for computer supplies is written, that was the issue, but the motion was for the legal ad. You fixed it. You did. Okay.
Okay, hearing no more comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it is 6:15, I believe. It is time for the public hearing for Stone Ridge, a private community, file number 23-002 SP-LIF-SPA-LID. This is a application for an independent living facility under our bylaw, and this is going to be a complicated, not a complicated, but a long meeting. So I would hope that everybody would allow the applicant and their help to present their project. We do have, and then what, I don't know if everybody got this, but there is, I don't know what is it with
You can give that to Jim. Please, thank you.
So, the The applicant will introduce themselves and give a brief overview of their proposal. The board will then read into the record any and all reviews from staff, from various town departments and peer consultants. The board will then make recommendation to the applicant regarding the application status. The applicant states what they intend to do, and if the applicant wants to continue the public hearing, the board will set a date and time certain after we get through this. This is an open meeting. Please remain respectful. All questions and comments should be directed through the chair. Comments must be on the project itself, not about a previous project. There should be 3 to 5 minutes per person. If you wish to speak, there's a pad up front in this chair right here that I'm pointing to. And I will, once that's been filled with names, I will go one by one down that list and call on you individually. And please don't make repetitive comments because we get the comment. So if you have the same comment, it isn't necessary to do it again. And this will probably be not the last meeting on this. So, and while you're making your presentation, I would like you to remember that we want to hear from you why this complies with our independent living facility bylaw. Item by item.
I'll introduce myself, Attorney Mark L. 138 Rock Street, Fort Massachusetts. I represent RNL Building and Development Corp. They are the applicant and party under a purchase and sale agreement to purchase this property, provided the board seeks favorably eventually. We understand this is not a simple matter. We understand that this will not finish tonight and will need different clarifications as we go on. As the last week, we've been getting, including up to yesterday, different comments from different people that the board's been kind to share with us documentation. Obviously, our presentation was based before we got that. And we understand there will be some editing of the plans and some of the documentation that is submitted to you. The board had originally seen an idea that we had before in presenting what my client was interested in. At the time, my client was not intending to develop this property. He came to him in late 2021 with a neighbor approached him that he was interested in buying the property because he had developed an abutting property. My client seeks to use the code and the provisions under the planning board rules to comply with those. He is looking to build up to 39 units, and that can change based on what changes would be made in the plans as a result of the comments that he's received recently over the last week. One of the issues that the board needed clarification was that we had legal frontage. We had to provide that we had at least 200-foot frontage to comply with the ordinance, otherwise we wouldn't be here. My client had sought the building inspector after review with another neighbor that had been also looking to use Mellows Way as frontage for their property. I understand that you have the original neighbor's one report, but we do have the building inspector's, we have several copies, opinion, that we asked him whether or not this lot had legal frontage on a way called Mellows Way, and he confirmed in a letter last June that, in fact, my client, he would issue a building permit based upon the fact that he would access Melrose Way as a way that conformed to the zoning requirements. With that, my client decided to continue to proceed with this project. He would have ended it otherwise. He relied on the building inspector as the zoning enforcement officer to make the determination. I'm informed that in tonight, meeting with the engineers and my client, that there is transverse up there. In fact, when the engineer says he has a Honda Civic and he's to go up there to do work, he just drives up Melrose Lane just to get to the property. It's not a big deal. He says it's gravelled. It's not a wide street, but it's sufficient to have travel up there. So that's one of the things there was an issue whether or not we conformed, because without that, we wouldn't be here. That's the point of blanking. We relied on that, and we're submitting that to you, that we believe that is our frontage. Yes, we are using an access, a driveway, across from Shabbat for the majority of the traffic will be there. The project is such that it lends itself to go toward Shabbat, relates to the design of the buildings and the drainages on the property. One of the questions is whether or not there would have to be any type of permission by the board concerning the permit from before. But back at that point, even though I didn't represent my client then, or the prior owner, which was Westport Horizon, he had acquired property by an abutter to make the access and frontage on Shabbat Street. It was known at that point that that owner wanted to have some access across there to get to Shabbat Street. My client agreed. As part of the special permit, my client, well, the board decided that he would be able to not more than 5% of the open area, contiguous open area, not do any other paving or other type of structures on that is not part of the building layout project. This little easement that he reserved in the condo documents that were done back in 2006 by review of the town council, and went back and forth before we finally had condo documents, and then got the special permit, because that was a condition of this board, allowed my client under the provision to grant rights of ways or easements and roadways to other butters, not only to the property. He had the common area became a non-exclusive easement between the association and himself. He even had the right to withdraw land at that point in time, or to not even complete phases of the condo documents. I'm going to give you a copy of the condo documents, so not that I expect you to read it now.
You can give it to the town.
But under the last provision, which is 18 on page 51, and also section 11 under, I think it's page 36, there was specifically put in there the rights of the developer to do things that were not part of the condominium association. And that was the right to give easements to others and to allow other roadways. He didn't know in 2006 that in 2021 someone would approach him that they wanted to sell land to next door to him. This was done because someone else had given him some land, and he properly put that in the condo documents. Town council, I think it was Kathy Mitchell, that had worked for the town council, the law firm, had gone through these documents, had edited certain sections, including those rights that were put in there, so that the easement that we are proposing is a driveway that comes off of Shabbat, goes through some of the common land to the project, is permitted and allowed. The engineer has confirmed to me that all water, no calculations or changings for extra water that's going to go on to Oak Ridge, that will happen. In fact, one of the things he'll explain to you that the design of this new project, the water currently comes up from the northeast corner toward the southeast corner of the property, of this new locus. All that water traverses presently some of it over Oak Ridge and some of it up the abutter to the south of my client's property. This is going to be taken care of by having a berm along the westerly boundary, so not only is it going to prevent water that was naturally occurring and flowing over from Oak Ridge from this neighbor, it will go down to a drainage at the south end of the property, connecting to where there is a wetland on the abutter's property. This property, one of the nice things is it's completely dry. There's no wetlands on it. The project has been designed so that it's 150 feet away from a buffer from any construction that's going to be on this property to the wetland that's to the south. We believe that the independent living facility is such that we are providing condominium units, that's the design. Each of the units will have a self-enclosed limited area for their wells. The septic systems will be designed so that they are sufficiently spaced away from that project. We understand that we do need to have affordable units. Presently, the design is that there would be 6 affordable units. In fact, the Affordable Housing Trust, I am told, voted at a recent meeting that they would support this project and actually advertise under their seed program to support the property's development. It provides some necessary housing in the town. Yes, my client is not doing this as a 40B. He wants to make some money on this project. Had it been a 40B project, you would not have this type of development. You would not have homes that are going to be going for $500,000 apiece. You would have a development that would be more an apartment complex. My client's not interested in any of that. That, you know, is something he's not looking forward to, but could have been done on this project with a lot easier tasks. We believe that with the project itself, that it will have the amenities that are necessary for the living facilities there. Now, the original proposal, and brought to our attention that may have to be changed unless the board waives it, is the community center that he was planning was a separate building, much like the abutting property. It's brought to our attention that the bylaw may state that it needs to be included within the residential units. If that's what the board believes should be used, instead of having this so it's a set away from the homeowner, so it's a little quieter at different times, then that can be incorporated within the project itself, and the units would be brought on the top floor from where the community center would be. Like I said, we're willing to work with the board and make sure that we comply with the zoning bylaws to do this. And that's not a problem. I think we're now, I mean, I've touched upon what I think needs to be done as far as what this project is about. I'm going to have Mr. Smith spend time to the specifics that relate to the project and the different areas of the zoning bylaws, because he's the one that made the designs. But I think that what we are looking at is a project that will bring some amenities to this neighborhood. It will keep the residential values in this neighborhood as high as they are now, if not higher, because these will be new construction, so people will be paying a higher price because that's the way the world is right now. We think this is a nice project and that we can provide for the statute what it requires and still provide some affordable housing to this town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Bill Smith, President of Civil Engineering Concepts, 34 Main Street, Little Compton. you had asked for me to address the independent living facility standards. And if you'd like, I can do that now. or- Item B under standards, item A is assisted living, so that we're talking about independent living
Right.
as opposed to the assisted. Affordability, as Mark had stated, we are providing affordable units at 15% of the total number of units as required by the standard. Open space, so the open space minimum of 50% of the project will be designated as open space. We're actually approximately 40,000 square feet over and above that 50% number. Contiguous open space shall have at any point a minimum width of 125 feet. We've designed it so that we do have that 125-foot width measured from the frontage on Mellows Lane. Required open space shall be used for conservation, historic preservation, and education, outdoor education, park purposes, existing agriculture, existing horticulture, forestry, or combination of these uses, and shall be served by suitable access. So the open space, with the exception of the community center, which is allowed to be located within the open space, will be vegetated, lawn, wooded. We'll have some septic systems and stormwater elements that will be within that open space, but it will be vegetated and meet the forestry or combination of uses as indicated in the standard. We're not over 5% of the open space for that may be paved or built upon for structures accessory to the dedicated use. Along with this, we were proposing to have sidewalks on one side of the street. That, I know that was an issue with the project next door, and I want to get into that. We also are proposing to have some off the driveway walkways that would connect Shabbat Street up along the gas easement to Mellows Lane, and then back onto the property for any of the residents that are physically able to walk along a gravel or a shell type of parking lot. I think gravel or recycled asphalt is what is being proposed there. We will provide a recorded restriction on that open space that would be enforceable by the town, and that would be in the legal documents that would be forthcoming. Buffer areas and building setbacks. The requirement is all dwellings and structures shall be located at a minimum of 60 feet from adjacent properties and 80 feet from adjacent surface waters. As Mark had indicated, we don't have any wetlands on the property. There is some wetlands on the south, along the southern adjacent property. All our work was proposed to be outside of the 100-foot buffer zone to maintain a vegetated protective setback to those off-site wetlands. Within the site, no clear cutting shall be permitted except incidental construction of building roads, trails, and parking areas. There has been some clearing that's been done on the property. The building official has issued a cease and desist for that clearing. The developer got a little overzealous in terms of trying to get a head start on clearing for his roads and his house locations. I guess depending on what the outcome of the hearings are, any of those disturbed areas that are not required for the driveways for the houses will be revegetated and reestablished so that we maintain that buffer zone, open space, naturalized requirement. Roadways, the principal roadways serving the site shall be designed to conform to the standards of the subdivision. So the access driveway, as opposed to a town-accepted road, will be built to the town standards for roads 20 feet wide, paved, that sort of thing. We're not asking for any waivers on composition or the width. Parking, we are providing adequate parking. Each of the units will have a garage and a driveway so that they can park a vehicle or two vehicles, whichever. We're not anticipating having any on-street parking that would be allowed. There is parking that's provided for the community center, although I'd imagine in most circumstances, the residents would walk to the community center if there was a function. Loading area, if required. We don't envision, the way this is set up, we don't envision that there's going to be a need for any loading area. It's not like it's one large building that's going to have a loading dock and you know, the amenities that go with it. This is going to be typical, or more like a typical residential project. I guess that's something that the board would have to give us some direction or advice on. Stormwater management. So in the earlier stages of the project, we had 2 concept meetings, and some of the comments that we had gotten from the neighbors were that the westerly boundary, which abuts the Oak Ridge project, was having some issues with water in basements and things like that. When I designed the stormwater system, we included a berm along that western side on the boundary between Oak Ridge, so that the water, instead of passing over onto the Oak Ridge, would be diverted into a swale with check dam segments to help promote infiltration, cleaning the stormwater. They would be vegetated to help reduce the impact of the intensity of the water coming off of the site. I know Mr. Daler had some issues with how I broke out some of the watersheds, and I will revisit that. My analysis did show that for the pre-developed storm and the post-developed storm, that we maintained that flow of water coming off or reduced it. So I think we've tried to adhere to the stormwater management aspect of things, tried to follow the state guidance, and I recognize that there's some things that we need to look at and possibly clarify, but that was the intent. Through rain garden for the community center, several vegetated swales, bioretention basins, those types of things have been incorporated into the design. We've got a pretty shallow water table out there, that's somewhere around 2 feet, so we weren't able to do a lot of the more innovative pervious pavement, you know, leaching catch basins. We couldn't maintain the separation to groundwater with those types of storm drainage systems. So we used the bioretention basins and the other systems that I just described. Utilities, all electric, gas, telephone, water, and other utilities will be placed on the ground. So we do cross a gas easement as we come into the property. And in lieu of having to dig across the gas easement, we're asking that we be allowed to put that first pole in over the gas easement and then go underground from there through the rest of the project. We've been in contact with the gas company. There's a high-pressure gas line that goes through the property, and we're trying to see if there's any way that we can do something with them so that we can provide the residents natural gas. Water will be done by individual wells serving each of the units. That was an issue with the health department, saying that they may consider that to be a required public well application. When we did the Oak Ridge project previously, we provided individual wells in the limited common areas for each of the residences. So it actually served as, well, not necessarily a lot, it was a designated area for each structure. And we were following that same principle when we laid out the system that's before you this evening. So we have to have some dialogue with DEP with the Board of Health. And if the planning board staff would like to be part of that, we can certainly make that available conveniently. But we were using the same rationale that we had when we did Oak Ridge, and we were allowed to proceed in that same light. Paths. So I talked about the paths that we're going to have sidewalk on one side of the street, and we're going to provide the off the drive paths through the project, kind of more of a naturalized nature path. Paving and curbing, we are proposing that we have a Cape Cod berm or a sloped curb so that it'll make it easier and barrier-free for pedestrians. The architectural character. So our project is going to be very similar to the Oak Ridge project. I think the board has visited that project, and I think the comments that I had heard was that they appreciated how it came out. Now, I know there were issues, but in terms of aesthetically and architecturally, and we were planning on using that same type of structure, color scheme, that sort of thing. Because of that, I didn't provide any architectural drawings in the submission, but we can certainly provide that to you, building elevations, some of the other things. An ILF shall have an integrated emergency call, telephone, or other communication system. So that's something that can be provided for each of the units. I think that was offered to the Oak Ridge residents for those that elected to have that, but I don't think there were many takers at that time, but that can certainly be integrated into the project. No building or structure shall be floodlit, and it's not our intent to do that. We're going to try and keep it down lighting as opposed to floodlights glaring through the property. Limited but safe street lights. Again, very similar to Oak Ridge, unless the board feels that we need to go over and above that. Okay, in order to, the ILF shall comply with the federal and state access requirements. And I believe that we do that. We have an adequate driveway system, excuse me. The access to the buildings will be built so that it's, it again complies with all federal and state requirements. And those are the standards for the ILF. And if you have additional questions, if you want me to.
I do. I would, so just as a process here, I think we have a few quick questions that we would like you to elaborate on. Then we'll go into the comments from the other boards. And then we'll go into public questions. And then we'll come back and go over in nitty-gritty detail where we're going. Okay? So, as you were presenting, I have a few questions. The 50% open space. I don't see it. I don't know where it is. Maybe you could point it out. It's supposed to be contiguous, but it kind of looks to me like it's a standard subdivision, and you're counting all the land where the buildings aren't as open space.
Well, that's essentially correct. That we're agreeing that those areas where the buildings aren't, there was an exhibit in the package that open space exhibit plan. And that was, and it does show
Is there a number to the sheet?
only about 10 pages after, 15 pages after the application.
I mean, is it part of the plan?
No, it was an exhibit that was in the binder, or in the package.
It's not in our packet here.
Bill, would you like to, you have paper copy, you have,
I don't have a bigger copy. I
oh,
just
you don't
this
have
one.
one, okay.
But I can pass that around, but it does wrap around the development of the houses. Some of that is septic system, and there's a central portion that's maybe page 3 on the plans. I can kind of
So the side yards are open space. That's part of the open space. Is that general definition of open?
So this is the project. These are the houses in here. We've got this area that encompasses the units, and this area in between the units in here that we're going to designate as open space.
And you're using the gas right away as open space?
Well, it kind of bisects the property, so we've, well, yes, so it is included in that calculation. Again, we have an extra 40,000 square feet, which would, if you wanted to deduct the gas easement, I think we would still have the required 50% open space. As far as being contiguous, again, there's a gas easement through it, so we're kind of, really that's a site condition that we're trying to work around.
Okay. The ILF requires, part of the requirement for the ILF is congregate housing. And I'd like you to tell me how this is congregate housing.
So, it's a grouping of housing that has one common goal or common design. They're not all connected. It's not like the assisted living where meals are going to be prepared and you're going to have healthcare that's more around the clock. We do have a community center that the residents can elect to provide gymnasium if they wanted to have some equipment to be brought in. They can use the open space if they wanted to establish bocce courts, that sort of thing. Our feeling was that will evolve with the neighbors. We could certainly guess at what would make sense for them, but I think that it probably is a better option for them to make some decisions. The developer has indicated that as he sells the units, he'll be putting money into a pot for the owners association, for them to do maintenance, improvements, and things along those lines. I wish I could give you a better answer for that.
Can you give me a definition of congregate housing?
I didn't see one in the regulation. So essentially it would be a cluster of housing that support a common goal. And I'm winging it, I'll be honest with you.
Okay. And for Mellows Way, you mentioned Mellows Lane and Mellows Way. Are we talking about the same thing?
Mellows Way, yes.
So, do you have documentation that the applicant has the right to use it? Who owns the property where Mellows Lane is?
I believe that we do.
There's a package in here that was submitted by Attorney Williams' office. The building inspector had that.
Could you please come up to the microphone?
I apologize. I was hoping to take this away. There is a package that should have been submitted to you that was presented to the building inspector for his determination whether or not Mellows Way was in fact a way that could be used, and he concluded it was a private way, which was an ancient way. I thought it was supplied to you, but this is the package I have. When the neighbor to the south applied for a building permit for the lot right below us, and then subsequently we piggybacked with their information to the building inspector, who gave finally our letter that says, yes, we would give you a building permit for the use of this property because Mellows Way was a way that he recognized also as an ancient way, a private way that my client had rights to. It was part of the chain of title that on either side, when the original owner subdivided it, he created the right for the abutters to have access over that to get down to the public way.
But does he have the right to improve it?
Anyone that has a right under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 58, I think it is, has a right. Anyone that has a right that abuts a way has a right to make those improvements necessary to get access to their property. Includes electricity, utilities, and it's a statutory right. I think it's 58.
So do you have, I'm not going to go through this thing tonight, but do you have proof that this was a way in existence?
It's in that package, yes.
And it's on some map somewhere
Yes,
as Mellows Way?
yes.
Is this for us?
Yes, that's for you. It actually had been called something before, and I think it was in 1924, it became Mellows Way on the assessor's plan. It had just been a private way, it hadn't had a name before. And then became, I think it was 1924, it became Mellows Way, it was shown at that point. I think the town, when they had, was an engineer from Fairhaven, do the plans up there, he changed it, or called this Mellows Way.
And so I guess the stormwater, either Mr. Baylor can speak to that, or we can wait until we go through the comments and go through the planners' reports.
I just had a general question, Mr. Smith. You're here representing the developer, correct?
Correct.
As is the attorney. And so you speak for the developer, correct?
Yes.
I mean,
Developer is here as well.
Yeah, but when you make representations and you, in describing the project, you're saying that if certain changes have to be made as a result interactions with the planning board, there is give and take, and you'll listen to us. At least that's
Of course.
that's the sense I get, and I appreciate that. Because it shows respect for the process. But you also mentioned that the developer got ahead of himself in clearing, and there was a cease and desist. And so that shows lack of respect for the process. And so that's that's the developer's attitude towards this. And so my concern is, as we go through this process, there'll be representations made about things that will be done, or agreements made about, we'll do this or we'll do that. And so I'm thinking, so will this be Mr. Smith or the attorney who represent the developer and say, yes, we agree to that? Or is this a developer who shows that, well, I'm going to act before we even have a meeting with the planning board and get started on this even before we've talked about site plans or anything else like that? Who is it? So you see, I have a question about who we're dealing with here and what's the attitude towards the process. As the chairman said, it's a lengthy process, and before we're even beginning, we have people making decisions before we've even started.
I can address that.
Could you do that? Because, you're gonna spend a lot of time back and forth on
No,
this.
no.
Someone's already started making decisions.
No, what my client did was, in preparation, and it wasn't for just the development, he was trying to get where all the survey marks that need to be, and where they're gonna put drainage. And actually, I did not know myself, and he did not know, there is an application if you clear, it doesn't matter what it is, a certain amount of land, you have to apply for a permit. And he didn't know that, I didn't know it, and when he got called on this, he called me up and said, I never heard of that, but I'm not a builder, I don't do that.
Oh, this is first development?
No, it is, but
Oh, it isn't.
he hadn't cleared what he believed was an extra area that was beyond the square footage. So that was a mistake on his part, he agreed, he stopped. And, it wasn't just for this, but he was trying to figure out where he was gonna put everything. And it was just taking some of these trees down, because you had to get a machine in just to have the surveyors go around the property and boundaries and set where the drainage would be. Whether this project was approved or not, he was doing that anyway just to know what he was doing, and it was a mistake. And we didn't realize, and I didn't realize, it was a separate permitting to clear a certain square footage of area of trees. And that's what happened, it was a mistake.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So are there any more questions from the board before we go to the planner?
Mr. Chair.
Yep.
So that permit, I'm just curious myself for my own information, how much of an area can they clear without a permit?
It's 1 acre.
Actually, the Board of Health has a requirement, if it's more than 5,000 square feet, that you must file with them. And if you do more than 40,000 square feet, that complies with, that triggers our site plan review bylaw. And I believe it also triggers the NIPD's permit.
And we have applied and received the NIPD's permit.
You have the full permit?
It's in the package, yes.
Okay, so next, we're gonna go through the planners. Now let's go through the comments from other boards and committees. And Michael, could you do that?
Read the comments from other
Please.
boards and committees.
Yep.
Do you want to get it into the large again?
Comments.
Well, this is not, assessor's is approval, so it's nothing.
Okay, here is a comment from the Westport Commission on Disability. The chairman, Brian Gallagher of the Westport Commission on Disability, stated, "We would like to be sure that the sidewalk in front of units 1 through 25 has curb cuts so that a disabled person using a wheelchair, walker, cane, etc. does not have to deal with the sidewalks ending at a curb. Curbs are difficult / impossible to negotiate. For units 26 through 39, we request that a sidewalk with curb cuts be included in the plan."
That was also approval with modifications.
Yes, their recommendation was approval with modifications. Thank you. The Westport Board of Health recommended disapproval for the following reasons. The type of development and number of units would require a public water supply. Further discussion with DEP would need to take place before moving forward. Recommend a joint meeting to be set up with DEP, the applicant, planning board representative, and a Board of Health representative. They then provided the DEP contact for this project. And they have also recommended that the applicant or their representative for the project present the proposed septic design to the Board of Health for further comment before moving forward. The Board of Health did not provide a approval, disapproval recommendation, but they did provide comments.
Board of Selectmen, I mean.
Or Board of Selectmen, excuse me. And they had the following concerns: water runoff, public safety, traffic, environmental effects, sidewalks, wells, and septic. Building department burden, quality / quantity of water, pipeline, mental health of aging in place residents, privacy buffer, work quality, lack of compliance. Mellors Lane egress, appropriate use of bylaw, taxing on town services, lack of communication, noise, and stress on the land. Our building department stated that they had issued a cease and desist order due to land clearing starting without a permit and approvals. The building inspector did a site visit on November 18th, 2022 to investigate a violation of Westport zoning bylaws 8.2.1 through 8.7. They provided a stop work order and posted that on the Chavez Street side of the parcel. And here's a photo of the stop work violation. And a photo of the site following the clearing. Another photo of the site. And a third photo of the site. Fourth photo of the clearing. There's another photo of the clearing. Okay, this is a review from the Conservation Department recommending approval of the request, and with the following comments saying that the applicant has a approved wetlands delineation, determination of applicability issued for minor work and buffer zone, no further comments. The police department attached a report. And it does not appear that the attached report is,
It's at the end.
it's at the end, okay. That's the,
Fire
It's
department.
fire.
Oh, sorry.
I will read the fire department and perhaps we will see the, police department at the end.
Yeah, it is at the end.
So the fire department made the following comments, that the roadway design and fire department access shall comply with 527 CMR 1 C18, stating minimal 20-foot width, not including any Cape Cod berms. Fire apparatus access roads shall have an unobstructed vertical clearance of not less than 13 feet 6 inches. The angle of approach and departure for any means of fire apparatus access road shall not exceed 1 foot drop in 20 feet, or the design limitations of the fire apparatus of the fire department, and shall be subject to approval. MGL C148, Section 59. Display of street address numbers on structures must use enhanced 911 to use enhanced 911 service. Addresses shall be posted and visible from the roadway. The fire department stated that the distance from the roadway to the community building is undetermined. The fire apparatus access road shall extend to within 50 feet of at least one exterior door that can be opened from the outside and provides access to the interior of the building. The fire department requested that a lockbox is installed at the community building. And finally, the fire department also stated that one emergency access road is listed and recommended. Access road shall be a minimum width of 10 feet, unobstructed, and maintained annually. More than one fire apparatus access road shall be provided when it is determined by the AHJ that access by a single road could be impaired by vehicle congestion, condition of terrain, climate conditions, or other factors that could limit access. The fire department stated in their Fire Protection Regulation 100, in accordance with the Fire Protection Regulation 100, subsurface water storage tanks shall be installed within 750 feet of a structure. A fire department permit is required prior to the installation. The water storage tanks shall be protected, filled, dressed with the appropriate connections approved by the AHJ, and in service prior to occupancy. The fire department shall inspect the water storage tanks for function prior to any occupancy. All subsurface water tanks shall be located within easements provided exclusively for this purpose. Tanks shall not be more than 1,500 feet apart, so that every residential structure shall be within 750 feet of a subsurface water storage tank. The fire tank located closest to the intersection of the proposed new road with the existing public way shall be located within 50 feet from station 0+00 as measured along the right-of-way sideline from the proposed road between station 0+00 and 1+00. Each suction pipe shall be located at least 7 feet, but no more than 9 feet from the edge of the traveled way. There must be no parking keep clear signs at each subsurface water tank area, and if needed, utility signage for electrical and gas emergency shutoffs shall be provided for each structure. They had the following follow-up questions. An indication of the road width on the site plan, distance from the subsurface water tank to the farthest structure, roadway distance to the community building, and cul-de-sac not listed. And here is the Westport Police Department comments. On February 6, 2023, I was tasked to offer my recommendations or suggestions on an application for special permit for independent living facilities and site plan approval for Stone Ridge, a private community at Mellows Way and Chabot Street, identified on map 21, lot 8A. The application proposes 29 single-family homes with 5 duplex units located on 15 acres of land. Upon looking at the provided plans that accompanied the application, Stone Ridge would be located to the east of Oak Ridge in an existing development with approximately 40 units. Access to both would be available from the cul-de-sac located at the end of Chabot Street. The plans for Stone Ridge show the use of an ancient right-of-way described as an 8-foot gravel trail named Mellows Way that leads out to Route 177. My first recommendation would be that a completed and approved plan be filed with the state regarding constructing an ingress-egress for vehicles entering or leaving Stone Ridge onto or off Route 177. This would ensure that a plan was in place to allow emergency vehicles to enter the development should Chabot Street access become unpassable. My second recommendation would be to alter the cul-de-sac at the end of Chabot Street to a rotary-type plan so that vehicles entering either development from Chabot Street would have to stay right and vehicles leaving either development would need to turn right instead of being able to cut through the middle of the cul-de-sac to egress through Chabot Street. This will increase overall motor vehicle and pedestrian safety with the obvious increase in motor vehicles that will be traveling through Chabot. And he is available for comments, or available for questions if the applicant has questions. The Zoning Board of Appeals did not provide any comments. And that is all for
Okay.
the town's technical review.
Right, so let's
The
go.
assessors department also was the first one, Michael, and it had an approval with no comment.
Thank you.
So could you go over S.W. Cole's report? And I think you can start with the numbered items.
Yeah, okay. I will read off the numbered items of S.W. Cole's report. S.W. Cole completed a review of the subject's special permit application off Chabot Street in a private right-of-way, Mellows Way. The following documents were received and used for this review: site analysis summary and low-impact development narrative, application for special permit IDL and LID plan, 9 sheets, pre- and post-development drainage calculations, stormwater pollution prevention plan, soil percolations test data, Robert Daler's marked up plans, Robert Daler's memo for the record to town planner dated February 4th, 2023. They made the following references: Town of Westport zoning bylaws dated June 5th, 2021, Town of Westport Planning Board rules and regulations governing the subdivision of land dated January 1st, 2017. The applicant is looking for special permits under the independent living facilities and low impact development to develop a private community with 39 units. Many of the requirements for ILF and LID have not been met. Robert Daler's memo to the town planner addresses these issues very well. Accordingly, the board should review Mr. Daler's comments and incorporate them along with these additional comments. Number one of the issues which allows this development to come in front of the board is the public status of Mellows Way. The assessor's map shows this as a private right-of-way. Besides the legal question that Mr. Daler has posed concerning this right-of-way, I present these additional comments. As this is a landlocked piece of property, more than likely this property was transferred to an easement to allow access to it. As such, the property owner, if not the applicant, should have a copy of the easement and what is allowed to occur within that right-of-way. If there is currently no easement, the applicant should require an easement from the 4 parcels they need to cross to reach Route 177. Applicant proposes to use this right-of-way as an emergency access. As such, the applicant should present what they propose to do to upgrade this right-of-way to make it accessible by emergency vehicles in all types of weather and ground conditions. An 8-foot cart path is not sufficient for an 8-foot wide pumper truck trying to respond to a call. The Westport Fire Department should review the proposal for adequacy to include also turning radius recommendations. The applicant should present a maintenance plan on who and when this right-of-way will be maintained to ensure accessibility into the future. Some kind of gate or means to prevent day-to-day access via this right-of-way, yet easily accessible by emergency vehicles is needed, unless the easement obtained or existing allows for full-time access to the property via this right-of-way. Number 2, easements. Even though this is a private community, all drainage structures located outside the roadway, such as connecting pipes, basins, swales, etc., shall be defined within an appropriately sized easement. Emergency access road will require an easement. A flow easement from the swale and emergency spillway discharges is required on the applicant's property and the abutters' properties until the flows following the existing contours reach and enter the designated wetland edge. Number 3, drainage has been changed from sheet flow and pre-development to a point source and post-development. Applicant needs to address how this will impact the wetland area and the wetland abutters downstream of their project. Number 4, where do catch basins 9 and 10 drain to as addressed in Mr. Daler's memo? Number 5, no sewer connections are found going to units 1, 6, 7, and 16. Number 6, per section 4A4 of reference 2, dead-end streets may be permitted if they are no longer than 1,200 feet from the nearest intersecting through street. The nearest through street intersection for this project, not considering Melrose Way, is the intersection at Chabot and Newton Streets. This makes the proposed private community about 1,590 feet from that intersection. The Planning Board has previously allowed the Oak Ridge project, which is about 1,613 feet from the same intersection. A waiver will need to be requested by the applicant unless Mellors Way can be upgraded to a public throughway. Number 7, the applicant should consider installing a well in conjunction with the installation of the cistern. This will save the fire department's time and effort if the cistern can be automatically filled via an on-site well. Number 8, point of issue to consider, applicant wants to name the street Woodland Circle. My in-laws live off Mouse Mill Road, Westport, on a private road for over 40 years, registered with the post office named Woodland Drive. In summary, I'm not quite sure what the end of that comment was trying to address, but there you have it. And then they go on to say that they agree with Mr. Daler that there are some issues, some things that need to be cleaned up with this application. And then the report goes on to include a number of attachments.
So for the record, I think we should reference Mr. Daler's comments. Have you gotten copies of those? So do we have them here? Or Mr. Daler, could you give us a quick overview of your comments?
I'd be glad to, Mr. Chairman. My comments looked in detail, raised the issue, which is really a threshold issue for us, the legal status for frontage, that Melrose Way providing frontage to this project. And I'm not an attorney, but I have some experience in this area, and I think this is an important question to bring to our town council to look at an opinion and to have him consider whatever evidence that we receive tonight. And then on the, I had some comments about conformance with the requirements, and I would just say that my opinion about compliance with the conformance and open space and all of that differ with the comments made here this evening. And then primarily I had some significant problems with the stormwater drainage. And it is difficult to read. I went through the calculations and I marked up the set of drawings that I reviewed. And I believe all of that's been provided to Mr. Smith, so he can see what my concerns were about the project. And the reason this is important is that many of the people in the audience live immediately downhill from this project. And the proposal is to shift some of the area that now is tributary to the northeast and to the southeast, that is out over the passway, Melrose Road, onto the adjacent property, to shift some of that and to bring it towards the west. And right now, just as the engineers commented, right now there was on the existing conditions a wooded lot with general sheet flow of when it rains, the water just runs more gradually off the hillside. And now it's proposed to fill that with houses and roads and all that kind of stuff. And the applicant in the design purports to address that, but I found a lot of deficiencies in that. And the bottom line, from my opinion, was that the project as it was sent to us cannot be approved because it doesn't comply with our regulations.
Okay, thank you. We've also received a letter from an attorney. It's 32 pages long. I think the first 3 pages are the 3 pages that outline what the issues are. The rest are attachments. But the attorney for some of the abutters questions, number one, the frontage on Mellow Lane Way. And per their argument is per subdivision rules and regulations, your access must be over the frontage. So, but I believe that Mellows Way existed before zoning was put in, if it does exist. And this is not a subdivision. So this is a special permit for an independent living facility. So the other issues were the legitimacy of the easement across the land that's owned by the Oak Ridge Association, being that the easement which the developer kept when he did the condominium documents for Oak Ridge was to that company, I believe, that company that did the development, which no longer exists, and that they believe that the developer does not have the right to transfer that easement right to the current developer's company. So, and was there another, what was the third thing?
It was related to satisfying requirements of our bylaw, various deficiencies.
Right. So, and that's part of the record. Have you received a copy of that?
Yes, we have. Thank you.
Okay. So if nobody has any more questions, I'd open it up to the public.
Jim,
If some,
do you want Amy and I? to
yeah, I'm
read
sorry,
it?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
You can give that to me, but they're gonna give us.
32 pages? No.
No,
I'm not gonna do that.
we're not gonna do that. So, I would like the planners to give us their report and the recommendations.
So Amy will provide a more detailed report, but there are a couple of things that I would like to request from the applicant as follow-ups, and I can provide all this information after the meeting as well. But I would like to request that the plans are with the existing vegetation are redrawn so that the bounds of vegetation as it exists today are drawn, so the board can get a sense of what exactly has been cleared and what exactly is still existing on the site. And then for any sort of streetlight installations or landscaping, any vegetated buffer strips, any landscaping, there probably ought to be a landscaping plan showing where those plantings are going to be located and the depth of the vegetated buffer strips and whatnot, and also to include a planting schedule for those landscaping plantings. Any screening should be delineated on the site plan, so that would include any plantings or fencing. And this is just one I think that's about it. I don't remember in the project materials if you indicated how refuse services will be provided.
I did not, no.
Okay, so that's the last one. But Amy has a more detailed report to
Okay,
read
I'm
into.
gonna jump in between you. There's one thing that I forgot to talk about. It has to do with the stormwater. That the improving of Mellows Way, I believe, has caused a problem with water not being able to traverse Mellows Way and causing backups and ponding in some of the properties to the east of Mellows Way off of Lighthouse Lane. And I think the reason for it is the damming of the water by the gravel and whatever it is they put on the roadway to make it accessible to their trucks. So, and I believe that that has to be addressed as well. I don't think that you have the right to do that.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I have one concern, because we do have Oak Ridge here, and we understand that he got overzealous and he cleared all this land, and it does sheet all towards Oak Ridge, and I know you've got your Nepres plan already. If, whether this gets continued for development or if it needs restoration or something, I think maybe some erosion control can get up there to protect the neighbors on the land that was cleared.
Good. Amy?
Okay, so after reviewing the application submission, I'll list my findings. Just in general, the application references Mellows Way and then also references Mellows Lane. The applicant should clarify which spelling is correct. Some documents reference Stone Ridge as one word, while others are Stone Ridge as two. That should be clarified also as a spelling. Throughout the application, Woodland Circle is referred to as a roadway and a common driveway. You should clarify which one you are proposing. The application references individual houses. The applicant should clarify whether this development is houses or condominiums, since land ownership is different with both. The applicant does not provide an explanation as to why a waiver is being sought from the town requirement for the peak post-development stormwater flows by 80% of the peak pre-development stormwater flows. I'll skip the frontage because we've discussed it. As far as the phasing goes, the applicant is proposing that all site work be completed as a single phase, and the development of each house will be done as the units are sold, with some model units being constructed in early stages. The applicant anticipates that no more than 5 structures will be in various stages of construction at any one time, and the actual occupancy of dwellings will be based on the demand for the units in the economic climate. This is a vague timeline and should have more detail. The applicant does not state how many model homes there will be on site. With a maximum of 5 structures being simultaneously built, the construction on the site could potentially drag out for quite a while, since 39 units are being proposed. Can the proposed construction access of Mellows Way adequately handle the volume of construction vehicles for an unspecified amount of time is a question. How long can the surrounding neighborhood expect to hear and see the ongoing construction? Does the applicant have the rights to make the improvements to Mellows Way? The SWIP also mentions that for the entire project, the projected start date of construction is May 1st of 2023, with an estimated end date of construction of October 2024, and with only 5 units being simultaneously built at one given time. That's 3 units a month for 17 months if construction were to start May 1st and there was not any delays at all. How will the site work can be completed in one phase if the units are being built in increments of 5 and based on the economic climate? This would usually cause the constant digging up of the site to install underground utilities, etc. For the low impact development, the project site was significantly cleared prior to the filing for this project. The applicant was made aware through the zoning enforcement officer's issuance of a stop work order that work of this proportion on site is to cease until the site plan approval for low impact development is filed and is granted by the planning board. Due to the prior unpermitted clearing of the land, I would say that the project itself does not meet the design standards for low impact development, since the applicant has failed to preserve the site's natural features and environmentally sensitive areas, minimize the grading and clearing of the land. The applicant has graded and cleared the majority of the parcel of the land prior to the filing. It does not minimize water runoff from any development. There is now pooling of water on property along Lighthouse Lane, where there was previously not any water pooling prior to any clearing and grading of the project site. It's unknown where the downspouts outlet to. There is no owners association documentation provided, and they need a maintenance plan for the access ways. Regarding the maintenance plan, it's not acceptable to make the homeowners association responsible for the operation and maintenance of infrastructure improvements when 50% of the units are completed and sold. The applicant did not provide any footprints of the units. The applicant has filed an NOI with the EPA for the NEPDES permit, but I'm not sure where the NEPDES permit is. I just know that a notice of intent was filed for it. And you need to delineate the vegetation buffer strips and indicate plant materials. For the stormwater and operation maintenance plan, the plan states that a maintenance agreement will be prepared between the property owners and the town of Westport that allows the town to perform any required stormwater system maintenance that is being neglected by the developer of the homeowner or the homeowners association. The town will be reimbursed for any required stormwater work. Woodland Circle is not proposed as a town accepted road. There will be a homeowners association established for this. Therefore, the town of Westport should not be a part of the maintenance agreement for any stormwater system maintenance that is neglected, as the development will be private. For the independent living facility, the application fails to provide the ILF narrative of how the proposed development will meet the standards and comply with the zoning bylaw. The application does not propose any congregate living arrangements. The overhead electric should be located underground. If the holder of the gas easement objects to burying the electric, the applicant shall provide a statement. The ILF application proposes 29 single-family units and 5 duplexes with 6 affordable units and 4 market rate, while the Section 2 analysis summary has the conflicting proposal of 31 single-family units and 4 duplexes with 6 affordable and 2 market rate. The site analysis summary mentions that the landscaping of the site will be similar to Oak Ridge, and this is an inadequate description. A planting and a landscape plan should be submitted to the board for review and adequacy. The site analysis summary states that the building architecture will utilize the same plans as Oak Ridge, and this description lacks necessary details, and such details should be illustrated and must be consistent with the regional New England architecture, and clearly stated in order to allow for adequate review. As mentioned in Bob Daler's comments, there has been many complaints about the quality and construction of the neighboring development at the Oak Ridge ILF. The plan submitted with the application shows some of the units within the 100-foot setback. Inadequate amount of open space. The gas easement is being used towards open space, and the applicant is required to provide at least 328,115 square foot of contiguous open space, but only approximately 170,755 square feet of contiguous open space was provided. Open space must be used for conservation, historic preservation and education, outdoor education, park purposes, existing agriculture, existing horticulture, forestry, and a combination of these uses, and shall be served by suitable access for such purposes. The stormwater retention basins and sewage disposal mounds are not acceptable uses for open space. The applicant must calculate how much contiguous space is provided for future plan revisions. Furthermore, a draft deed restriction preserving the open space is required. The plans fail to depict the following: the size of the proposed buildings, the number of bedrooms, the number of building stories, how many cars the proposed garages will hold, any trees of 8-inch caliber or more, detailed drawings of signage, outdoor lighting, tree plantings, etc., There are no parking areas that are on the plan, and they lack parking for community center and lacks the info of any visitor parking or UPS, FedEx, Amazon loading or unloading. The trash disposal areas and method of trash disposal are absent from the plans. Elevation drawings of buildings and other major structures must demonstrate the height from grade to roof pitch that are also missing from the plans. A landscape plan with planting schedule showing the types, numbers, and characteristics of proposed plantings are also absent from the plan, and perspective drawings of 3D models for houses in the community center are also absent. The gravel pathway shall be designed for ADA compliance. The need for gravel detail for the pathways. If Mellows Way north of the construction and emergency access is to count towards the pathway requirements, it must be ADA compliant. An emergency evacuation plan is required and must be approved by the fire department. Would you like my recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. After reviewing the entire application submission, staff has determined that the application is incomplete and lacks the required information that is listed in the zoning bylaw. Furthermore, after reviewing the department commentary and the initial review from the peer consultant of SW Cole, staff recommends that the applicant request to withdraw their application without prejudice. This would allow the applicant to refile the application at a later date and time when all inadequacies mentioned in this review letter, department comments, and the peer consultant review can be properly addressed.
Thank you, Amy. Mr. Bullard?
I thought all of the comments from S.W. Cole, from Amy, from Mr. Daler were excellent, and I think the recommendation is a wise one. I would just like to underline one of S.W. Cole's recommendation, and that concerns the recommendation to rename Woodland Circle. I think you have to have a really warped sense of humor to name the main road Woodland Circle when the first action that you undertake is to clear all of the woodland. I mean, that takes chutzpah.
Okay, so now I'm going to call the people on the list that signed up to speak, and I would like you to come up to the lectern, identify yourself and your address so that we can have a record of it, and keep your comments short. So the first one is Michelle Wigney.
Good evening, members of the planning board. My name is actually Michael Wigney.
I'm sorry.
No worries, it happens all the time. Of Moriarty, Troyer, and Malloy. I represent the condominium trust for the Oak Ridge property, which is immediately adjacent to the proposed development, and just want to touch on a couple of items quickly and hopefully not duplicative. As noted, we submitted a 32-page letter that included most of our comments. First and foremost, I wanted to point out that even if the condominium documents for the Oak Ridge property do contemplate easements for rights-of-way, the condominium documents do not grant the applicant the right to unilaterally amend the special permit for the Oak Ridge condominium development. They don't get to bypass the 2006 permit that was issued, and any work, including paving and roadway construction that occurs on the common areas of the Oak Ridge development would necessarily require an amendment of the special permit. The next comment is there was obviously very extensive discussion of Mellows Way or lane or road or however it's being addressed. This is tellingly in the application not the proposed access, and in addition to all of the various issues, it is well settled in Massachusetts law that the access and the frontage that you have must be on the ground. It can't simply be listed on a plan. We would also note that the proposed access to the development from Chabot Street is at best potentially problematic and at worst actively unsafe. And we are adamantly opposed on those particular grounds. And our letter further noted several other issues, including documents missing from the application, inconsistency with the zoning bylaw, and the goals of the ILF developments, etc. That's all.
Thank you. And Moriarty, Troyer, and Malloy are not people, they're your law firm, right? Okay.
They are people, but
Yes,
they are law firm.
but they're not here to talk, so, okay. Next would be Charles and Ruth Sullivan.
Props.
Thank you. Charlie Sullivan, 48 Chapel Street. This is my wife, Ruth, and this is our ex mailbox post. This is my ex. Just a little thing to help perhaps explain what we're going to comment on. Appreciate your time. There's a little schematic of our area speaking for Shabbat Street and Newton Street combined, and we do that because both streets are short streets. One is about 2/10 of a mile long, and Newton Street is about 1/10 of a mile. So they're short little areas, and we have conditions right now. What I'd like to emphasize, basically 2 points, where we are now as a little neighborhood and what the imposition would be of this development. Paula Brown was to give you a petition that we circulated on both streets. And I don't know if you got that or you're aware of it or not, or have read the cover sheet. I can quickly read the cover sheet for you regarding this. Shabbat Street serves as a single entrance and exit of a 43 condo complex, Oak Ridge. Located at the end of the street, we have been experiencing delivery and personal vehicle driving at excessive speed with property damage resulting in endangering pedestrians. Newton runs from Tickle to Shabbat and serves as the quickest way to the highway via Tickle and is therefore busy. Both streets have experienced an influx of young families with small children, and both streets have a high number of elderly persons walking for exercise, young mothers pushing baby carriages and toddlers alongside, and a host of persons who walk their dogs in the whole general area. Because of the location of these streets, this is for you folks, because of the location of these streets, people from a whole general area come to exercise their animals. And so we always have a brigade of pedestrians on these two little streets. On a personal level, we had our car parked in front of our house last year and it was totaled by a healthcare worker leaving Oak Ridge while texting. This year, in January, a resident of Oak Ridge lost control of his vehicle during a fog ice incident on the area and smashed into our front bank, rode on the bank across our driveway, ripped out a steel post office, mailbox post, and then coming out here, took this out here, crossed over here and hit a cedar post, took that out, and then wound up down here. The gentleman, of course, was a victim of, to a certain degree, ice and conditions. But my point in all of this is we don't want to wait on these two streets to have this be a person. And that is coming at us very quickly. While doing the petition, I listened to comments in every home, comments of close calls while trying to back out of a driveway or walking. All are very concerned about the new proposed development, Stone Ridge, adding to the already dangerous situation. We are requesting speed limits of 50 and 20 miles per hour. We've been working with Lieutenant Kuto and traffic in Westport to get some traffic signs in there and correct our already existing condition, which is pretty dangerous. And that's a process, as you know. We are requesting the planning board also to revise the design of Stone Ridge if it is built and have its entrance and exit on Mellows Way to Route 177. Our streets cannot safely tolerate another 39 condo development. Why are we concerned? When you look at the little rough diagram prepared for you, right now, by actual count, we have on Oak Ridge, Shabbat, and Newton Street, including miscellaneous driving such as trash pickup, the 3 or 4 major developers from online buying that fly up and down the street and so forth, and miscellaneous maintenance people and so forth. We have a very conservative total of 118 vehicles circulating on these 2 little streets right now. And when you stop and think about that, that's pretty scary. And not commenting on anybody driving or anything else. We all drive in this room, and everybody could tell a story about what they've experienced on the roadway today. Overspeeding on any registered area for 25 miles an hour, people are doing 40, you know how it is. Texting and so forth. We had the highest rate of casualties by car in 16 years federally, so it's a national problem. But it's something we have to deal with. And that's what we're trying to do right now, is to make these 2 little streets reasonably safe. If we experience this development at 39 units, you can use a matrix of about 1.51 cars per household, and that would translate to another, with miscellaneous help, another 67 vehicles for a total of about 185 vehicles floating around these 2 streets. This is like throwing gas on a fire. And once again, we don't want to be standing here, well, we wouldn't be doing that, would we? If this was a person. I happen to have a front row seat on this because we're looking at a little diagram. We're this little dot up here at the turnaround. And our kitchen is in the front of the house, and I do the dishes for Ruth. Thank you. You're welcome. It's all part of being Irish. So I have a front row seat, and I see the vehicles flying up and down. It's scary. Ruth and I were at a doctor's appointment today, and we came home on Chickle Road, and we took our left on Newton Street, and it gave me the willies to see a young mother with a baby on her back and another one in a carriage walking with her back to the traffic on Newton Street. It actually gave me chills to see it. So, if on the bottom of this you notice there's a little notation about residents of Shavish and Newton Street are concerned about the dangers of more traffic from a proposed Stone Ridge development. If built, we request the entrance exit be moved from A, Shabbat Street, to B, Mellow Street. And of course, as you know, Mellows Lane travels out to 177. And what we would want, would that be the primary exit and entrance, and also a traffic light on 177 to make everybody safe. Final point, try to be quick, but it's tough to be Irish. Final point would be, should it be built? Tom McGuire and I worked as co-chairs when Briggs Landing was built years ago, you might recall. And we had an 8-person committee, and we had 113 households in the What's Up Neighborhood Association. So we have a little bit of background and stuff. And this situation, if you stand up here on Mellows Lane and you look west over Oak Ridge, all you can see from Mellows Lane are the tops of the two-story buildings. And this gives you some perception as to how steep this drop is. Down here at Tickle Road, there's a conduit that receives the wash from all of this, which goes through Oak Ridge as well. And Saturday, I wish you had been with me, because I walked up there and I stood at that conduit after the little storm we had and snow. And it was fully the width of this roaring down from the top of this ledge. If you drive out Tickle Road and you take a left on 177, you run that long hill all the way up to the top of this to give you a perception on how high that actually is and the runoff involved. When you combine that with the type of earth that we have, which is basically gravel, sand, and clay, it doesn't absorb well. When you look at last year when we had 3 months of drought in Massachusetts, and all around West Point you could see people drilling wells that were tapped out. We have a 150-foot well, and it's a low-yield well. We raised 3 doors with it, and there's been no problem for 45 years, is it? 46, thank you. 46 years. But there's enormous concerns about too much water and too little water. The aquifer is not receiving the water the way it did before because we're having inch or two rain experiences rather than the normal thing that we've had over the years, and it just runs off. So it's not getting to the aquifer. Sticking 39 more straws into the aquifer gives me the willies as far as my well and everybody. Are we all nodding? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. We're all nodding about that because it's our water supply and it's scary. It's really, really scary. The runoff issue on Oak Ridge, I'll let my friend talk about that. Thank you very much for your patience.
Okay, thank you. So, I do recall going down Cabot Street, going up to see Oak Ridge, and it's not that wide of a road, and there's cars parked on the side of the road as well, so it's not exactly a thoroughfare. So next is Vic Ritano.
Hi, my name is Vic Ricciano, 4 Windsor Drive. I'm relatively new there. I've been there for almost a year and a half. I wasn't aware of this development that was going in when I bought, but I've become well aware of it now. I'm a little hard of hearing. More than a little, and I forgot my hearing aids again. But I thought I heard in the applicant's presentation that they were privy to rights of way over Oak Ridge land dating back to 2005. I don't know if I'm correct. Am I correct? That this was done back in 2005. Seems to me like that would infer a conflict of interest. Because they claimed that they weren't interested in doing this project until, I believe they said 2020, just a couple of years ago. It doesn't sound like that. It sounds like they were preparing to do this. And they took advantage of the position as the developer in making decisions at that time to institute these easements or rights of way, which to me is a dilution of the present property owner's rights. Because that association is not formed until the last property is sold. And I don't know. This whole thing, that project originally, Oak Ridge project originally, was a disaster. There were too many loopholes, too many approvals that shouldn't have been approved. And this adds insult to injury. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next is Tom Luffman.
Yes. Hi,
Aye.
I'm Tom Lockman. I live at 54 Lighthouse Lane. I want to discuss with you a few things. Some of them have been hit upon. I live on the southeast corner of the Stone Ridge development. My property is up against it. And we've owned it since 2013. And we haven't experienced any groundwater flow from Stone Ridge development until the parcel was recently cleared. And I had walked the south and western edge of the property numerous times in the last few years. And there was a dirt road and that paralleled the southern and western borders of the property, running from Melrose Way to Chabot Street, Windsor Drive intersection. Prior to the site clearing, I specifically noted that the water drainage onto my property would not be an issue, as the property in the dirt road grade was downhill from my property, and Melrose Way was above the dirt road at the intersection. On January 26, 2023, I experienced a significant water flow draining onto my property from the Stone Ridge property. Upon investigation, I realized that in clearing the property, the contour of the property was changed, and the aforementioned dirt road had been blocked, and a large area was filled with water. They created a pond, and overflowing onto my property. I took photos and went to a complaint to the planning department. Late in the afternoon, Ralph Souza came to my house and verified my findings on a change in contour of the land, forcing water onto my property. The water flow from Stone Ridge went into my yard, caused my swale on the right side of the house to overflow, and the water got within 50 foot of Lighthouse Lane, the road, and 40 feet from the electrical and cable utility vaults by the road. So if it had drained a little bit longer, we'd probably have blown the back into the development. Okay. So one of the things on the map, there's a lot of, when you look at the maps that are shown, nothing talks about Lighthouse Lane. Okay. Now you got to understand that there's 5 adjacent properties, but then when you start talking about Melrose Lane, you're talking the whole development. Okay. My well is within 200 foot of the septic system, and it's not shown on the map. My well. Okay. The Stone Way property is approximately 12 to 14 foot higher than Lighthouse Lane, the road. So if you go down to the cul-de-sac at the end, there's probably about 200 feet from the road to the top of the property. And it's a 12 to 14 foot drop. So there's a concern there, not only about the wells in the 2 lots right there at the end of the cul-de-sac, because my guess one's at least 50 feet from the property line, the other is about 75 feet, okay?
And they're really in danger with this current septic system setup. But, excuse me, there's a further problem that you're gonna have leaching from these leaching fields into that hill in the cul-de-sac. Okay, no doubt in my mind, okay? The other question is, there's a concern about the future availability of well water, roll-on wells, okay? And when you look at the development map, you're seeing four properties on one side, you're not seeing the rest of the development. Okay. The bylaws for the site says that the site analysis does not provide for adequate water recharge. Okay, there's no analysis of recharge. And that's required in the bylaws of 9.41, and that's required for the low-income housing. I'm out of the continue on here.
The independent living facility?
Yeah, independent living facility, I'm sorry. There's too many terms here I'm not usually using. So so there's another strike, and that's required, so it doesn't, the other is, I don't know if you've done an independent engineering reviews yet or not, but they're on the hook for that, if you so desire it. Let's talk about Mellows Way. Prior to the recent development activity, the end of Mellows Way was deserted. Nothing ever happened back there, okay? So you would have an occasional hiker or a dirt biker, and that was it, okay? And the question I have is, why would you need a reserve for emergency use when the driveway supposedly conforms to the Westport Fire Department 20-foot wide requirement? And the problem is, that's inadequate because the bylaws provide that they're supposed to have a street, okay? So for an independent living facility to qualify. So therefore, that blown out the window. Another question becomes one of, it's a dirt road, and you got heavy equipment running back and forth, and you got down about a third of the way in from 177, there's water flowing across the property most of the time. And it's a wetlands. So the problem is, what are you gonna do with that wetlands and use that for construction, equipment going through it? And the way it's configured right now, you need the lane to pump out the development septic systems. Okay. So I question, this whole goes back to what the use is of Mellows Way. Then the other question that came up earlier was the construction phase could go on for a while. And somebody I've heard say that the Oak Ridge went on for about 6 years before it got finalized, or whatever. So, if the lane was to be upgraded, who would do it? Where would the water be directed to? There's no place to put it. Okay. Right now, it's being absorbed into the road. If you turn it into an emergency access, who's going to plow it? Who's going to maintain it? And then the other question is, with the proposed increase in usage, why aren't the other houses that abut Mellows Way invited to these meetings? Because they're affected. Okay. Let's go to stormwater pollution prevention plan. The development currently does not have a natural water exit, in other words, a stream or a creek. The developer is requesting a waiver from the town requirements for the peak post-development stormwater flows to be 80% of the peak pre-development stormwater flows. There's also somewhere else in one of these plans, or one of the pages from one of the engineers, it says they even want it less than that. They want it 70%. I can find it. It might take me an hour, but I almost fell out of the chair. Like, what do I use here? Okay. I would suggest that this request be rejected, as there is no alternative natural water flow available. In other words, the water's got to go somewhere, and if it's on the property now, if you're going to shove 20 or 30% off the property, who gets it? Okay. The proposal doesn't allow for an ice or storm situation, so snowstorm situation, where the infiltration of groundwater is retarded. We all know if you have an ice storm and the ground freezes, all of a sudden the contour of the land changes, the water doesn't filter into the ground, and it runs across the top. And depending upon how deep that ice or snow is, everything goes out of whack. Okay. So the problem I have is with this 80% development request for exception, somebody's going to get screwed in this, and that's the bottom line. The system shows emergency spillways don't release into a natural waterway, but into an Oak Ridge property which would be inundated. The system takes 11 acres of runoff and concentrates it into a catch basins. And when looking at it, you have these about 2 acres of where it's being concentrated on, you're trying to get it to drain. A lot of drainage is situated on the borders of the property. So if you look at the layout, the borders of the neighbors are taking the brunt of the water drainage. Okay. The system's going to require maintenance, and the question becomes one of, is a homeowners association capable of maintaining it? Westport isn't set up to monitor a water storm system, nor should it. Okay? There's even in the documentation, in the long sheets, it doesn't say Westport, it says Tiverton. Maybe we can sock it for them. Okay? All right. Independent living facility. Okay, pretty explicit, no clear cutting, 9.41, residential street and open space requirement. You guys got it right. So I question, I don't know if about 60 feet between buildings. I can't measure that off the maps. So, but thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Laughlin, I just wanted to talk to you about the percent of stormwater that can be. You can give that to the. So, when it says our requirements are to reduce the amount of runoff to 80%, it means that it's 20% less than it was before development. And that's what they're asking us to waive. But usually in a subdivision, for instance, or a site plan review, they're required to reduce the amount of stormwater running off the property. It could go off onto the neighbor's property, but they have to reduce it by 20%. So,
Who's going to go?
right.
The other question is, who's going to fix where it stops running onto my property?
And I think the other issue is with the development, so they have to be 20% less than the pre-development standard. And when they develop like this, there's gonna be more water than there was pre-development, because there's so much impervious surface.
Right.
So it's a struggle for them to do that, but we're aware of that, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next is Donald Cruz.
I'm here, sir, but I didn't ask to be,
Okay,
make a statement at this time.
all right,
I'm interested observer
okay.
from Oak Ridge.
Okay, is there anybody else who didn't write their name down?
Mark Allard, Oak Ridge. I wasn't intending to talk, but since Charlie referenced me, I figured I wanted to clarify something. And it's been said a few times by the engineer that they focus in on the western boundary of Oak Ridge. It's really important people know that literally every house in Oak Ridge at some time has had water in it. And so it's not just the western boundary, it's all the way down the hill, very steep hill going down Windsor Drive. Part of that was also lack of oversight, because virtually every one of the foundations is cracked. So it's a double-edged sword. Water, I can't oversight it enough. We are very, very worried that if this development were ever to happen, we're gonna make a real bad problem worse.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Smith, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Jerry.
Oh, Jerry.
My name is Jerry Catino. I live on Petty Lane in Westport. I also have been involved with the zoning issues for quite a while in town on the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I just have a couple of items. I think this type of housing is needed and is very, very good for our community. However, I've always had a problem with this. I had a problem when Oak Ridge was being proposed, and I spoke up about it, and I have the same issue here. I think we don't have the proper bylaw in town for this type of development. If you read this bylaw that they're using, you can read through it that it was at a time when there was a lot of need for assisted living and independent living, and they were taking large buildings and making them, converting them into these uses for particularly for elderly people, and the independent living was one of them, and they called it congregate living arrangements at the time. I happened to be director of the Housing Authority for quite a number of years, and so I was involved with housing and planning and so forth. And the term congregate housing was meant to be, at least at that time, where people would live together. They'd have their own units, their own bathrooms usually, and living quarters, but they would come together for common activities, dining, entertainment, socialization, things like that. I think Amy's report kind of touched on that a little bit when it talked about the lack of congregate items. So that's a big concern as far as I'm concerned. And if you go to the bylaw, it gives the purpose of the bylaw right off the bat. There are 4 purposes of this bylaw. The first one doesn't apply at all to this. It's all about assisted living. This is not what we're talking about. The second one is independent living that offer congregate living arrangements to persons over 55. You could stretch it, and maybe you could fit that in. back when the Oak Ridge was proposed, and I brought up the same issue, they said, well, we've got the trails, gravel trails around it. We'll build a gazebo, and they can congregate there. That was honestly the answer, and that's what they did. And that's why you have that at that place now. The third one, it seems to me, third purpose, has been completely violated. The development of these items in a manner that conserves environmental features, woodlands, wet areas, open space, areas of scenic beauty, views and vistas, as well as encouraging the renovation and rehabilitation of older existing buildings. I don't think that's the case here in any part of that, especially what I'm hearing tonight. And fourthly, the development of these in a manner that is harmonious with the surrounding land uses while protecting natural resources and open space. And that's not what I'm hearing here tonight. And I just think that it's an inappropriate use of this bylaw. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be a bylaw, because I think there should, but I don't think this is it. Second thing I wanted to check was what zoning district is this in? I have not heard what that is. I don't think it's business.
It's agricultural,
Okay.
residential.
And the reason for that is, in the bylaw, in this bylaw, there are treatments, in some cases, different, whether it's, what the planning board has discretion over and what it doesn't. In the residential agricultural, it appears as though the planning board would have no wiggle room to allow waivers for certain things, but if it were in a business district, the bylaw does allow it. And then the other thing is, I guess it depends on how you define some of these setbacks and dimensional requirements, but I think it would be very hard to fit them into what they're trying to fit them. So I just think it's an inappropriate bylaw to be used for this purpose.
Thank you, Jerry.
I had a question for Jerry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jerry, before you Jerry, I don't know what metaphor to use, whether, it's looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, or whether it's a metaphor of a round peg in a square hole. But I want to get at this maybe a different way, which is, you've gotten at it by looking at the bylaw. I want to get at it the reverse way, which is, if you look at the site plan and don't look at the title and don't look at the bylaw that they're coming to us with, but just look at the site plan with all of your experience, what does it look like to you?
It's like you're jamming in as much as you can on that, but not.
Is that a subdivision?
It sure looks like.
It looks like a subdivision.
Yes. But it's jamming in more than a subdivision
Right.
would allow,
Right.
and that's the key.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Jerry, I agree with a lot of what you said. I was not on the board when this was approved, but I had been sitting in the audience, I think, as you had been. And I do think that we need a bylaw for over 55 housing, for condominium things. And we're looking at rezoning Route 6, the Route 6 area right now, so that we know we need more housing. We need to be able to comply with the MBTA requirements that are coming. We need to do this. I think, despite the issues at Oak Ridge, I think people like the property. Forget about the leaking foundations and the issues of the sidewalks, but I think people like living in that kind of environment, and I think beyond those issues, I think they all like each other, get along, and it's a good kind of place to do. I agree with you to push this into this bylaw, like the planning board did. There's none of us here that were there. And I think they just didn't have experience with what independent living facility really was. And I have experience with that. My parents were in one, and it is not this. And so I think we have to really decide and guide the developer what we think. And I think he's heard what we think about individual parts of it in terms of the stormwater and everything else. But I would like to focus on the bylaw itself. And I don't think that this fits in the bylaw itself. So, but anyway, I think we need to give the developers, people, time to rebut what they've heard, and then get down to the nitty-gritty.
Jim, the developer's representative had indicated at one point about 40B and not $500,000, although Briggs Landing was a 40B, and they are in the $500,000 range, unexpectedly, I guess. But anyhow, another 40B in town has a similar to what these folks are proposing, and that's the Village Way across from the apothecary. That, of course, has an apartment unit in the back, but it also has the condo units all the way in. And that was a 40B, and I think it's pretty nice. And I think other people do too, because they're buying them. So I mean, it can be done, but you know, the 40B is sort of like a different specialty for a developer to sort of involve themselves with. So hopefully someday we can get some bylaws that will be able to encourage this type of thing. Thank you.
I agree. The good thing about 40Bs, Jerry, is that it gets out of our lap and it goes into your lap.
That's fine.
Mr. Smith, or Mr. Levy?
I just have one interjection. There's been some talk about Mellows Lane. I just want to make it clear. There was another individual who's south of us that was cited for making changes and moving material off his property into it that my client knows caused a problem, but that person was cited, not my client. He didn't make any alterations. And he tells him it was 14 feet wide when he started with the thing, and the only thing he ever did is up near his part of the property, he trimmed the trees that just overhung that area. He didn't make alterations. Someone else did, but it wasn't him. They were cited.
Well, somebody made the driveway into his property, right?
Well, that's all he did.
Right.
He did. But I mean, he didn't make any improvements down on the way because someone else was cited.
Below that.
Doing it. That's all.
So,
Chair, can I ask a
yeah,
question on that?
yeah, sure.
Mr. Attorney Levin,
Yes.
I just have a question on Mellows Lane. Like, where did it originate? Like, what street did it come off of?
Well, it started all the way down 177, went up.
Was it cut off when 177 was constructed?
It was, well, I don't have the title exam here, but what it was original common owners that owned a great portion of the property that came down. It got chopped up. As it got chopped up, the owner that had the primary ownership rented this right-of-way to either of the abutters to the center line away all the way down to 177. I think it's in the package that Attorney Williams provided.
Yeah. So,
It was before 1860 is what he's giving you the date.
so can I ask a question of Mr. Laughlin? Is he still here? Yep. So your property abuts Mellows Lane.
Yes.
Is your property line on the west side or your side or in the middle?
It's on the east side.
So you don't own Mellows Lane?
No,
You don't own any part of
No.
Mellows Lane? So, and are you directly across?
He's really in this
Right
corner.
there, right there. So, is it the property of, in question that owns it? As far as you concerned? No?
as far as I know, it's the owner of this property here.
This property. So your deed goes to this,
Yes,
to the east boundary?
because my neighbor had his stake adjacent to me,
Yeah,
and the stake is right at the edge of the road.
This lot.
On the east side,
on this lot?
yeah.
So this is your lot,
Yeah, it's right where that arrow is, there's a stake.
right there?
I can't see that.
Oh.
Yeah, Sean had it surveyed, and a
So right-
survey put a stake in right there, right at the
Right,
corner.
right on the corner, so that's, you're in his boundary on the right. Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith?
I think your question was, the question was, does, do they own to the middle of Mellows Way, or do they own to the property? And when Mark Boucher did the survey, it's, the property ownership is to the edge of the way, but not to the center of it.
So who owns it?
I think it's an ancient way.
Well, somebody must, even if it's an ancient way, it isn't, usually, either you own to the center of it, or you own it, or the other property owns it.
Well, by statute, there's a, again, I can't remember the chapter, I tried looking on my phone, I can't get to the anything else, but the chapter, there was a section, I think it's 58, chapter 58, gives everyone, if they're not reserved, the original owner doesn't reserve it for his own use, it passes to the abutters. And they have the right to pass and repass, put utilities in, make improvements.
So this packet of stuff that you gave us is going to prove to our satisfaction that you own the right to use it?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that is just one issue
Right,
of 24
right.
that are not going to be solved tonight. We've just identified 24 issues. And so what we're asking you is, what do you want to do? That's what the recommendation from the assistant planner is. How much time do you need? And if you have a request, now would be a good time to make
Yes.
the request.
So there's a lot that was brought up by the planner and other people, so obviously we need to spend some time looking at the plan, seeing what we can implement, seeing what changes we need, whether we combine buildings, whether we remove buildings. So we do need some time for him to do this. I would rather not withdraw it, because I'd hate to bring back the same or a similar plan and start from the beginning when you've already had a lot of input. I'd like to be able to sit down with the engineer and the developer to see what we can implement, or actually implement as much as we can, if not everything that you suggested. So, I mean, we want to provide the plan that you want, and I don't know if you're gonna need the time.
There's quite a bit to digest here. I would say 6 weeks. Can we do 6 weeks?
6 months, maybe?
I
I mean, you've got a lot of work to do.
And I prefer to work out some of the details with the consultant before we bring it back to the board.
And you can work with the planners too. I mean, you
Oh, yeah.
can work with everybody.
Of course.
How about like
But-
90 days? Yes?
I don't think you're gonna be ready in 90 days,
okay.
are you?
So there are various issues. For example, if frontage is required, as the attorney said, on your main, not phrasing this right, on the main way, and not on Mellows Road, you don't have a project,
That is correct.
right? So there are various things that are deal breakers that you probably want to address first, that involve you talking maybe through the planning office with our town council to resolve. That's a legal issue. There are other issues like drainage or the litany of issues raised by S.W. Cole, Mr. Daler, and the assistant planner that go back and forth with Mr. Smith and the planning office. But you probably want to get the things that either determine whether you have a project or not, like the frontage issue, done first. I think the chair's suggestion of 90 days.
No, that was my suggestion.
Oh.
I was questioning 90 days.
Yeah.
I don't, there's so much to do. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because
There are a lot of issues here.
Oh, I understand, I do,
Yeah.
but
There are a
I'm
lot
just
of
trying to
issues.
not delay it for you.
Yeah.
We could try to push it through, but
what I want to avoid is to have another meeting like this and still have a dozen issues
You're
that you
right.
have to come
Yeah.
back for.
I agree with
So
you.
if you can work them out, fine. If you can't work them out, withdraw. But, you know, we've got other things to do too. You know, we don't want to keep on
Sure.
coming back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in the meeting.
Should
So,
I excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's, you know, through you as a suggestion. I think you have to resolve the frontage, the Mellows Way status, really to the status of, to the satisfaction of our town council, because it's really a threshold issue.
Yeah.
And then secondly, you really need to make a case of how this conforms to our bylaw, because, you know, I think I had almost an identical reaction and comment in my comment letter to my colleague, that there's a need for this housing, but what you show doesn't fit the words, and certainly don't fit what I think of personally. And I, you know, I'm of an age where both my parents have gone through the having their own house and then having a smaller house and then living in a condominium, then, you know, and then my father died and my mother lived in a condominium for a while, then moved into an independent living facility, and it doesn't look anything like this. And she had friends and they traveled and they had dining together, you know, that idea, you know, that's, I read the words and I have in my mind the image of what North Hill and Erickson's project in Hingham looks like. And I said, yeah, that's, those things look like these words. Your project doesn't look like these words. So, you know, you have to make a case of why we should give you a special permit. All right? If you solve, yeah, it's really a buildable lot. And you know, I think you rely upon the building inspector opinion. If you think that will carry the day with the board, it may not. And I think you need to solve that problem. If it's solved to the satisfaction that you got a buildable lot, then show us why we should give you a special permit. And then there's a whole bunch of engineering kind of stuff.
Sure.
All right? And I marked up, I reviewed this and I marked up a set of drawings just as if I were reviewing it in my own professional life, and I marked up with comments and all that stuff, and And I really did that, and I have no intention of going through that in public. But I did that so it could be given to Mr. Smith, so he could see what my review comments were. And it's the kind of, honestly, it's a kind of drawing it's a kind of mock-up that I had wished had sat in his office and not in my office, because I have other things to do. And, so looking carefully at those kinds of things, I think that's the secondary step. But two big hurdles. Give yourself, if you're gonna continue, give yourself a chance to make those arguments. And then there's the nuts and bolts stuff of making it work.
I appreciate that you did spend the time, actually, because I hadn't got that copy, but I listened to what was in there with the Coles report, and I know you did a lot of work, and I think it's admirable that you had the time, unfortunately, to do it. With that, I think maybe the suggestion is we suspend, and then when we think we're ready, we'll send you a letter asking to be heard and send the plans in advance.
It's a problem with open meeting law that we have to, I believe, if we're gonna continue, we have to let these people know when, and when it's gonna be.
No, but if we give you a letter telling you in advance, can you mark it up for the month or whatever?
No.
Oh, okay.
We would
I'm
have,
just trying to make it easier.
you have to do it to a date and time certain tonight to
Continue,
to continue.
My client thinks 3 months would probably be sufficient. He's gonna work very hard on it.
Okay, so what's available?
But before we move on too far with this, I think there is also an important question brought up today about whether or not the Oak Ridge special permit also needs to be amended. And I think that would be another threshold question that, as Bob said,
I
that's
think,
kind of the
that's wrapped
essential.
up in the frontage and access. So they're gonna need to say where the access is going to be,
But
and do
if-
they have the right to do it, so.
Right,
I
through
think-
the,
Yeah, it has to go through Oak Ridge, and if it is Oak Ridge and it has to be paved or anything, it's gotta come for amendment to the special permit.
correct.
Which would have to be done by the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association, the owners.
Well, if I may, in the special permit, it said my client had the right to make improvements, not into the common areas, not more than 5%. And it talked about paving, it talked about sidewalks and other structures that he had.
But is it mentioned that it's the person or the company that built Oak Ridge?
It was for the project,
Huh?
for the project itself, runs with the land.
How can it run to the land? I mean,
I don't
Permit
know if
runs with the land.
necessarily settle this question tonight, but I
No,
think
no,
it
no.
bears
That
investigation.
is an important question. It was both raised by the attorney and it goes, and I think it goes beyond whether or not the prior developer, when he had control of the homeowners association, left himself some rights to do something, which it seems like he did that. But now that the homeowners have this, do they, that is collectively Oak Ridge, are they the beneficiaries of the special permit?
Well, they are.
They
My
are,
client
right.
did reserve rights, so
Well.
No, but the question
I understand what you're saying.
I only play a lawyer on community
No, I
television. I'm not
understand. I understand what you're
Right,
saying.
but I think that the question from the attorney was that the entity that built Oak Ridge is no longer in existence.
Correct.
And they're the ones who had that right. And so, who has that right now? It may be extinguished.
Well, under the statute, they had the right to assign all their interests, and that's what they did do. It was a
When?
doc-
When did they do that?
Well,
you don't do it.
listen,
Deal with their attorney who knows all about this, please. I mean, We're
But
not
it's a-
attorneys, but that's the issue. That's,
But it is an issue that needs to be resolved in letting the planning staff know that it's resolved,
So back to, what date do we have, 3 months from now?
pretty much.
We have, we're March, so June 13th or June 27th. They're both wide open. So,
27.
at
Made
6:15.
an executive decision.
Okay.
27th at 6:15.
So do you want
A motion, please.
Mr. Chair, I move that we continue the public hearing for Stone Ridge, a private community, till June 27th at 6:15.
Second.
Before we vote on that and close the hearing for the time being, I would just like to say that
Yeah,
Mr. Gaylor's
we need to continue.
notes are public record, and
I
they
said
would be
continue.
available in the
Yes.
planning board office.
Excuse me, Mr. Smith let me know he's not available on the 27th. We'd do the 13th.
Yeah, state.
13th.
13th. So I said to continue, you mentioned close.
No, I don't mean close,
Yeah,
but close
to
for
continue
tonight.
the public hearing
So
to
that's
June
the-
13th.
That's
Okay,
amended motion.
excuse me?
Yeah.
Hello? Hello?
Okay. This is not the end of this meeting.
We have to continue working.
Yeah, so you should hear this because we're continuing this meeting until June 13th at 6:15. So, you made the motion?
Yep.
Second.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
so we'll see you again June 13th.
Did we get any more comments on this agenda?
No,
None came in writing, email, or anything else?
not that I'm aware of. We don't have any comments from the zoning articles for any.
No, we have no additional comments and that.
Okay. We're continuing to meet, so please bring your discussions outside.
So,
Okay, next up is the 6:45 public hearing.
So, Mr. Chair, you want a motion on this?
Yes.
So
Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, you will recall that we left open the public hearing on zoning amendments so that we could receive further comments from people who might want to email us or send in letters or walk in and give comments. And I understand from talking to Michael and Amy that we have received no additional comments on that, which, and I think Jerry would be interested in this as well. So I think that bolsters an argument for town meeting that in your presentation, that you can present all the meetings we've had here, some held jointly with the zoning board, all the opportunity people have had to come and give us their points of view, and how these really are along the lines of technical amendments, and you don't need to take a lot of time at the annual meeting. And with that, I would move that we close the zoning amendment public hearing.
Second.
So, planners, after we do this, do you send this back to the select board? To Jim Hartnett? Or do we review it again and make any amendments that we talked about in the meeting, in the
So-
hearing?
I've drafted the warrant articles and forwarded that to Jim, and we're waiting to hear back from the town attorney if they have any additional comments. I don't believe they need to go back to the select board at this point.
We shouldn't have waited until we closed the public hearing to send them back to Jim Hartnett for the select board to put into the warrant.
Well, they're
Shouldn't we have waited until the end of the public hearing?
they're just drafted. He hasn't sent them over to the select board yet.
Okay.
So I prepared them, and other departments are preparing their warrants as well, but they haven't really.
Okay, and were there any tweaks or amendments that we talked about in the public hearing?
Any amendments that were requested would have been incorporated. I don't have track changes in front of me right now, but I would have incorporated them at that time.
Okay, so all those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Short and long-term planning discussions? I think the short term is to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Oh,
Yes,
Excuse me, can I just ask a question related to your last subject?
right.
Obviously, we don't want to overload any town meeting with a lot of these things. That's why when we were working together to plan these, we would take little bites at a time.
Right.
Do you expect that the rezoning of Route 6 will take so much time at next year's town meeting that we should not consider any of the other leftover items?
Yes.
The big one, right? That's what I kind of think too,
It'll be I don't know if it will be a big contentious issue, but I think it'll be a big thing for us to get done.
Yeah.
So I don't think,
Oh, you're thinking that on town meeting floor may not take very long.
right,
Yeah, the work ahead of, but either way, we should just hold off on some of the leftovers that we left from last year.
right. I don't think it's going to affect many people throughout town. I mean, we're talking about along Route 6 corridor. And so you're talking about the people who live there or who own businesses up there that would be affected. And hopefully, they participate in this process and are cool with it by the time we get it done. So,
Yeah, I would like to, try to attend a meeting or whatever with a consultant. I have no clue what direction you're even heading with the rezoning, big box stores, whatever.
There's no such thing as big box stores.
But,
There used to be.
that's what I'm saying, it may or may not be controversial, because I don't know what's coming out of it. So, eventually, maybe there already are, but these meetings with the consultant for the rezoning routes is already being posted and so.
we had one meeting. Roger had been invited, but then he resigned.
Yeah, I
So-
wouldn't know where, because I'd like to just kind of stay on top of it, that's all.
We'll put you on the list, obviously.
Yeah, so,
And anybody, who else on the board would be interested? I mean,
yeah.
we need people to bounce things off, to talk about.
We're not moving into public meetings yet. The consultant's anticipating we'll move into public meetings. He said late spring, but I think realistically more midsummer.
So, whatever, I'd like to just stay on top of it, that's all.
But is there anybody else on the zoning board?
There might be.
Could
We got a
you,
new member last night too, so,
okay, well, ask everybody,
yeah,
because
thank you.
it shouldn't be a surprise to the zoning board, I mean, obviously, when it comes
Also,
up.
if there are any other items, any amendments that come up, please forward them to me, and I've been trying to keep track of all of these as issues come up. So if there's anything that comes up through ZBA proceedings, let me know. And we'll keep a list for next
Specifically
time.
related to the rezoning of Route 6, you got, or
No, just in general.
in general?
Okay,
We're adjourned.
all those in favor?
Aye.